Late last year, I got my hands on my first Fuji film camera, the XS20, and since then I've absolutely loved it. Primarily, I've been using the 15-45 motorized kit lens and a 35mm f1.4x7 Artisans, which was a very cheap lens, but also a great little low light option for when I need it. But I needed something to fill in the longer ranges, especially since I was traveling to Japan and I needed to photograph the Formula 1. I wanted a lens that could cover me from maybe around 50mm to 200 plus, and use this as my main lens throughout all of my travels there, and to be honest, there were only a couple lenses that really filled that criteria. Tamron do a range of zooms, and one of them, the 300mm, was very tempting to me, but in the end I went with the 55-200 XF by Fuji themselves, and I gotta say I'm very happy that I did. This is a lens that I bought secondhand in mint condition for about £250 here in the UK, which is a massive decrease on the price that it used to be, which was closer to 500 to 600. And if you're looking for a telephoto, I'm going to explain today why I think that was the best choice that I could have made and how I found the lens so far. I've taken it to Japan with me, all across 10 plus different prefectures, and also to Norway, and I've been very impressed with its performance, with a couple of caveats here and there. So let's get into it. Before we talk the actual specs of the lens and how it performs itself, I want to talk about the build quality, because it is pretty good. Fuji overall, I find their lenses are a bit of a mixed bag, just in what the lenses come with themselves and the build quality there. The actual lens itself, the glass is lovely and the build quality feels solid. It is plastic, but it doesn't feel flimsy, it doesn't shake too badly, and there isn't really much creep in terms of accidentally pushing the lens in or out when I'm extended. You definitely can if you knock it, but it takes a bit of force to push that lens back in, so it certainly doesn't move on its own. My problems come in with the lens hood and the lens cap. With Fuji lenses, I feel like they are a bit plasticky. This is a general complaint with a couple of brands that I know, but especially the lens hood just doesn't feel that great. It's perfectly functional, it doesn't really fall off if I shake it around. It is built fine, but it does just feel a little bit on the plasticky side for the price that you're paying for the lens. But who cares about that, because the lens itself does feel pretty robust, and it definitely does have that Fuji quality to it. Now, this lens is 3.5 to 4.8, and I found this performance to be quite nice for daytime shooting and some low light occasions, but it's not going to be as great as using a low light lens that can go down to, say, 1.4 or 2 or something like that, which is what I have my 30mm for. This is to fill in those gaps in the daytime and in the early evening and when I need a bit of reach, and it's perfect for that. In terms of image quality, I was really impressed with this. There's no distortion that I could really see, no pincushion effect at any of the ranges between 55 to 200, and I used it at all of the ranges I possibly could. For both my trips, to be honest, I had this lens on almost all the time, and I didn't really plan to. For both video and for photo, I put a variable ND on the front and I was sorted for both, and I never really found that I wanted to swap between any other lenses, apart from a couple of larger landmarks where I wanted to get close up and fit everything in frame, in which case I swapped to the 15mm. The lens is quite fast as well, so in low light, pretty decent, and the optical image stabilization is pretty fantastic, activated with a switch on the side of the lens, along with your aperture manual or auto. Now, the stabilization, I would still say, for video in the future, I would probably use a monopod a little bit more, especially for the longer ranges in terms of focal length, but for photo, it's perfectly fine. It's really smooth. It gets nice images even if you don't have the steadiest of hands, but again, for video, yeah, definitely get a monopod for those longer shots. I took some with Mount Fuji with a monopod, and it was so much better than without. As a test for the stabilization, here's a shot that I took in Bergen's fjords of a couple of waterfalls. This is all on a moving boat, handheld, and you can see a little bit of distortion and blur in some of the rock face here if you really look into the details, but honestly, at this shutter speed, pretty happy with how this looks with the stabilization on. It really helps there. One thing that I did find though is the focus distance is about 1.1 meters, I think, from the spec sheet. And I did definitely feel this with targets closer up. You want to be using a lens that is built more for that sort of thing. But again, if something is that close, you're getting an equivalent of 80 to 300 millimeters here with the 1.5 crop factor of an APS-C lens with X-mount. So you might be too tight on it anyway. I found that throughout my trips though, it made me think a bit more creatively in framing and having to work around using a longer lens like this, and it never really was a big hindrance. It helps that the lens is quite light as well, so I could properly shift around and get some decent shots in a very quick time frame, which is the main thing for me, because I wanted to make the most of my trips and see as much as I could with my own eyes and take enough coverage, but also enjoy the moment. So having a lens and a camera that I can kind of whip out pretty quickly and get the shots that I need and then put away again helps me enjoy the trip the most, and that was very much appreciated. The autofocus is pretty damn good as well. I actually tested this lens with both the XS10 and the XS20, as the XS20 has better autofocus than the previous model, and to be honest, the results were kind of the same between them. The autofocus on this lens is fast, it's good. I used it at the f1 on both cameras. The XS10 did have a bit of a performance drop in the f1 on continuous autofocus with object avoidance, trying to track cars through the netting and fencing, so the XS20 did outperform it here a little bit, but overall for most cases, you're not really going to notice, and this lens is pretty fantastic and fast. The autofocus is also pretty silent. I didn't really notice any noise, which helped for videoing. I use manual focus on video anyway, but if you like to autofocus on different targets instead of using the focus ring, you're not going to have a really loud noise disrupting your audio here. The manual focus on this lens is by wire anyway, so it does trigger that computer to move the lens focus point rather than manually doing it, so the noise would be about the same anyway. With an ND, I was able to get quite nice shots with some nice background blur on several subjects throughout both of my trips and time with the lens and camera as well, which is nice to see. If you're bumping up the shutter speed, you don't need an ND for this, but for video, I like to keep my shutter speed as it should be, double the frame rate, so an ND is very much needed there, but the images it comes out with are pretty fantastic, and the thread mount for this is 62mm. Overall, those are my impressions of the Fuji XF 55-200. Even to this day, it is a fantastic lens. It's really sharp, really fun to use, and honestly, I used it as my main lens for almost everything throughout both my trips, and I didn't regret anything. I didn't feel too constrained. It did almost everything that I needed it to. And when I needed those wider shots, I could switch to the 15 or use a separate action cam, which does help, of course, with the vlogging situations. I use an Insta360X3, but by all means, I could have shot the entire trip just on this lens alone. I enjoyed it that much. So have you got it? Let me know in the comments below. What are your favorite Fuji lenses? And I hope to see you all in the next one.